Boy, have we got a episode for you. Things are changing. Times are changing. Drew's got some big news. We're going to dive into it. I think his introspection is important and something that we should all be doing, maybe even like twice a year, something like that. Checking in with ourselves, seeing where we're at. Really excited to share this one with you guys. Before we get started talking about HelmBot, there's a really cool, it kind of seems like a little update, but it's like such a great update, which is that when a client logs in and you have a full schedule, which of course you do, it automatically moves forward so that it goes to the next open appointment. So they don't have to keep scrolling throughout the week to find when you guys have an appointment. It'll just take them right there. So just like when somebody calls and they say, do you have any appointments available today? We don't have any today, but would you like to book further out in the week? Here's the next time that we have an appointment. The same customer service that you would do over the phone, HelmBot is going to take care of for you when somebody's booking online. Love that. HelmBot.com is where you want to go. Also, big shout out to the FTA. If you're listening to this live, there is a Veterans Day live roundtable hosted by the FTA going on today. Hope to see you guys there. FTA is pulling out all the stops. They're getting things done. I appreciate it. I really appreciate the community roundtables, bringing in experts and bringing in the community to have these big discussions. It's really quite helpful for us as business owners, and it just means a lot that the FTA is giving back to the community like that, like they do. Go to flotation.org to check them out. Highly recommend supporting them so that you're supporting the industry. They take care of us. You take care of them. We all do it as a community. It's great. It's beautiful. I love it. Flotation.org. Check them out. All right. Let's find out what's going on with Drew. Welcome back to another episode of Art of the Float. Where for the most part, flow centers thrive. We'll get into that in a little bit here. Everybody's thriving. But my name is Dylan, and I own the float shop with my wife Sandra in Portland, Oregon. And we'll get into this a little bit more later. But we're undergoing some serious construction right now, and our shop is being torn apart, or is about to be torn apart, and we probably won't be open for at least a month. So we have some major stuff going on, which producer Olga, if you're listening, let's go ahead and carve out an episode for that coming up. If you want to talk about selling a float center, I could consider selling my float center right now. That would be a consideration. Yeah. No, to be completely honest, we've been open for 11 years now, and I think we're getting to that point to think about what's next for us and potentially moving on. Yeah. Yeah.
Whew. All right. And I'm Kim Hannon. I co-own Tsukino Float Center in Salt Cave in Southern Indiana with my husband, Graham. I wonder how fast I can roll that off my tongue. We've been open almost 4 years now. And last week, our Halo generator went down. And so I've been racking my brain trying to come up with solutions, and that's been a full-time job trying to figure out how to fix that. So
what's a Halo generator, Cam?
It's a good question. A Halo generator is a medical device that grinds and disperses pharmaceutical-grade salt into our salt cave. It's what makes Halo therapy work. And you can't have a successful salt cave without it. You can have passive, but we don't do the whole passive thing. We do an active cave. But I will soon be selling a Halo generator.
Nice. And this is Drew from New Hampshire Float. And for the last, 2 or 3 years, people have probably heard me go back and forth from, getting frustrated, I'm out, to, I love it. And I'm kind of bipolar with it. But I, after 5 years, have officially, truly decided to sell my float center, and I am looking to do something else. And it's something that I did not take lightly, and I really put a lot of thought into. And I think we're going to be talking a little bit more about that as we go forward here, talking about the decision and what really, makes people want to sell or why you would sell. And I think I'm lucky that I am in a good spot, that I'm not burnt out per se, but my interests have changed, and I have ADHD. I would consider myself an entrepreneur, and doing the same thing day in and day out doesn't burn my candle, you know. And the chase and the journey of trying to start a float center was absolutely incredible, but I did it. And now I'm just running a float center, and and I don't want to make that sound negative, but for me, that repetitiveness of going to the same place, doing the same thing, like I need doubters, I need haters, I need a thing to really focus on that my goal, right? Yeah. So, so it's kind of been a probably horribly kept secret to a lot of people in the float industry. But I am like truly trying to sell my business, and coming up with that decision, I didn't take lightly. I really thought about it, and I've built an incredible community in my community, and I want that to continue forward. I want someone with new energy to come in and do things that I'm just not doing right now. You know, I'm kind of whatever right now, you know.
One thing here real quick. I think we're going to need to stop the recording and redo this. Can you say, I'm going to sell my float center, and then Kim and I think it's going to be record better if we go like, oh my God, you're selling, like just add a little drama to it. And go ahead.
Drum roll, please. I am going to be selling my float center.
Oh my God. What? Oh, Drew.
What?
No, not like this.
No.
Do it.
You can't leave us, Drew.
Drew, come on.
I will always be around in spirit, and hopefully I'll continue to be a resource. So for everyone out there listening, we're going to do a little bit of a series about this. We're going to follow along my journey as I try to sell, and I'm going to share as much information as I can. And I do hope to be a resource for others, because I do think, getting right into it, when you make the decision, the earlier you make that decision and start planning, the better off you are. And I have been actively preparing my float center for almost a year now to sell. Like, I've been doing a lot, learning a lot, trying to figure out how to get the best value out of it. And if you're in a good spot, I suggest you start doing these things, because if you wait until you are completely burnt out, that is the worst time to sell your float center. You will not get the value that you would get should you give yourself more of a buffer and more time, where you're like, I want to sell, but I don't have to sell, right?
Right.
And
if you get to a point,
that's what's so unique about where you are right now, is like you've been so successful for so long, and your center still continues to really thrive, and that is just such a different place than to be in a place of panic and fear and trying to dig yourself back out, where what you've created has worked and worked really, really well. It is just sometimes things evolve, and sometimes what you want in life, it changes, and
for sure,
I think that's okay.
I feel like several guests have brought this up. I believe Graham Talley has brought this up, which is entrepreneurs want to spin things up. They don't want to hang out and keep it spinning. It's exciting to wind something up. I know Gloria's talked about that for sure. And I don't necessarily know that everybody knows that about themselves when they start. They just like, this is the thing I want to do. And then 3 years in, they're like, oh, the fun part's done. The day-to-day isn't what I wanted. Mind you, there are 100,000 people out there who want to do the day-to-day too. Having the float center specifically is absolutely fulfilling for them. But Drew, it sounds like you want to wind things up, and not. I'm not saying walk away, but that's the part that thrills you.
Totally, that chase, and I'm definitely like. My dad died when I was young. I didn't have a great relationship with my mother. I was kind of on my own when I was really immature, and I had to survive. I had to figure things out. And I'm comfortable with hope and with chasing a dream. I've been doing that for years, and I thrived when I was chasing the dream of the float center and building a float center and having people tell me it was a dumb idea and why would you do that? And I just knew, because I was floating and they weren't, right? People who were telling me this is a dumb idea, they weren't floating and they didn't get it. But I did, and I got it, and I thought, if I can just convince people to try it, they'll get it too, right? And that chase really, and that doubt, like I thrive in that. I feel I need that fire, and it makes me feel alive. And yeah, some people can go to the same job for 20 years and be happy.
Right.
That's not me. It's just not. So being honest with myself about where I was at and what my interests were, I think was the first step. And also my skills, like, I've been open about my struggles with employees and training and hiring and identifying. And those aren't my skills. That's not my skill set. I stink at that. And I think, I've built something that is awesome for someone to come in and have better skills than I have in certain aspects and continue to thrive with the Float Center and get those warm and fuzzies and feel really good about it. But they didn't have to go through the horrors of building out a float center. I literally have scars on my body from cuts from the metal 2x4s that I use because I cut myself like half a dozen times, right? I remember falling asleep on my kitchen island, just covered in dust, no shirt on, just feeling disgusting and exhausted, and my hands were swollen and sore. And that was like when I was in it, still working as a probation officer. Like someone gets to skip
G
that
episode, Drew. Jeez, quit building this up here. Jeez.
We're trying to let you keep going, but we're stuck on Drew. Topless Drew asleep on the island.
You get me going. Waking up like, what's going on? But just being delirious with having a goal and being focused on it and attaining it, right?
Yeah.
And now it's a thing. And I never really thought about what happens once it's done. Yeah. I just have to keep working at it. I don't really want to do that. That's not what I want to do. I don't want to go to the same place every single day. And that's something I've learned about myself. I'm not good in a cubicle. I've done those jobs. I sucked at it. I was always disappearing and, I couldn't sit still. And as some people have heard it previously, I bought a house up in the mountains, and that has me up in the, I'm up in the mountains quite a bit, and I want to be up in the mountains more. That's the older I get, the more I want to be with nature and kind of cruise and be a hippie a little bit, Yeah.
I love it. It's like you've been on like the longest hyperfocus ever. For those who have ADHD, they know what hyperfocus is. If you're not familiar with it, basically ADHDers have a hard time paying attention to a lot of things, depending on their type. I don't want to overgeneralize here, but generally speaking, if there's something that you're interested in, you can hyperfocus for days and lose track of time, lose track of years, but the second you lose interest, all of a sudden it becomes the most challenging, difficult, impossible thing that it is so hard to force yourself to do anything. And, it's a fascinating little bitty, fine line in the brain that can be so super exciting. And then all of a sudden, oh my gosh, I can't do this anymore. And so the fact that you've made it this long is really impressive. I think, when I think about my career and previously in the corporate world, I was with the same company for 15 years. But within that, I was changing jobs every few years. And it was, getting promoted, learning new skills, doing something a little bit different, building on what I learned. And that kept my interest. And I noticed even, opening our float center and then opening Mindful Solutions, kind of doing both at once, that was a hell of a challenge for me, and I loved it. But then I got to the point where I'm like, okay, well, we did this, and kind of like you, I'm like, well, what else can I do? And I keep looking for ways to evolve what I'm doing. And maybe it's, taking an employee under my wing and showing them how to do some things. Maybe it's removing myself a little bit even more from certain aspects of the operations. And for me, it's exciting to be able to create a system or train someone else on how to do that. But I'm constantly looking for a little bit of that feedback. It's like a feedback loop, and something that's exciting, a challenge to overcome. So I totally get where you're coming from, Drew. I'm just not ready to let go yet. If somebody came in and offered me the right price tag, I would consider, because then I would turn around and do it again, a different way, a better way, or something like that. Totally. But
what's that price tag, Kim? For our listeners, what's that price tag? Or you would just walk away?
$1 million. $1 million. But I would, I have a list of business ideas. I used to have Post-it notes on my wall over here to the right with all of these business ideas I wanted to do. And I realized like having it there was bad for my mental health because I felt like it was distracting me. And I felt like I was failing because I wasn't doing those things when they were just really, things would be really cool. But I can't tell you how many complete business plans I have, how many like concepts, branding, logo sketches, like all of that. And not to say that they won't ever happen, because when the economy turns back around, some things might start happening. But I never thought I was an entrepreneur. I never thought I was going to be a small business owner. I just fell in love with the float. And then I think, Drew, like what you're saying though, is like you kind of sometimes get addicted to that, like build it. And right now I just keep building more and more and more around the float world, you know, and keeping it within that circle. But there might be things that eventually come along that are kind of tangents, but still somewhat related. But yeah.
Man, you guys are, wow. Like there's so many of the things you guys are talking about feel very personal to me. My goodness. I feel such similarities. When I was building the float shop, and it felt like this is all I will ever do was building. It was hard to even imagine it being open and running it. And then, you know, there's the day where it switches and all of a sudden this is your new life, is running it. It was so different. But during that time of building it, and I think even maybe when it was open, I thought, this is the beginning of a franchise. Like there is only so much money here. I know I will be having these all over the place, and we're going to run this place. The West Coast is going to be mine, baby. It wasn't that literal, but I thought that I was going to be franchising and that there were going to be a bunch of locations. And really what in my head is like, should I own every location or should it be a franchise? You know, like these are the conversations I'm having. And then we open. And very quickly it was like, F&A, Cotton, this is not dialed in. You cannot franchise with a float center running behind the scenes. Everything about this doesn't make sense. It was still the Wild West when things were going on. And so there was a lot of like fine tuning of it and then back burnering the multiple businesses part of it. And like, how do we do this? And then the float shop became this like, kind of like a little experimental box to try things out in, as opposed to, we opened this, it's perfect, and now we will replicate it. That just wasn't the case. And then meanwhile, while I was still like trying to figure out like what is the perfect design for a float center, franchises started popping up and they started, you know, to different degrees of success, they were happening. And I was like, I don't feel like we're there yet, but it took that person to be like, this is what's propelling me forward. It was more, I don't want to say more important than quality, like, which I feel like what I was about to say was going to sound like that. My value system I discovered wasn't about franchising. I don't think that would have fulfilled me. And things being a little bit more intimate, smaller scales, smaller relationships feels, has more meaning to me, more power. And then those people were figuring it out, you know, like whatever. I mean, and I don't have any insights to it, but when you expand to scale like that, then you have more mistakes, you figure it out, and then you're able to adjust to a scale that with this one center I wasn't able to do. Meanwhile, Kim, when you're talking about that stuff, I'm also thinking like, oh yeah, I started Art of the Float. So it wasn't a franchise, but it was this way to kind of keep things small but have a big reach at the same time. And all the things that Art of the Float has done, where it's like, I want to spin this up, and then I want to spin this up, and then, you know, it went from blog to podcast to photography to blogs to the next stuff that we'll be doing, you know, the store that's on there, like clothes. It keeps building, because it's like there's more, like you see the niche, you see what's missing, you know what your center needs, and then it's like, how come this doesn't exist? And then you feel that compulsion to fill it in. And then you also are like, and maybe things will be outside the float community too, or tangential or whatever. And it's like, yeah, I feel everything you're saying, I feel too. And I know our brains are working differently. They're in different spaces, but the soul of it just feels so similar for both of you to me.
And those are examples of your entrepreneurial spirit for both of you, who you're doing these other things, and yeah, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but neither of you are going into your float shop 5 days a week, right?
Correct.
Yeah,
I will not correct you because you are not wrong.
Yeah, right. So that's not you either. Because if you wanted to be doing it, you could be doing that.
Right.
But that's not that's your style, what makes you happy, what burns your candle, however you want to say it. That's not what fulfills you. It's doing these other things and building on these other opportunities that you see that come about. And what are you doing? You're doing that chase. You're going through the process. Right. You're trying to build, right? You're not just doing the one thing that you did. You're doing more. And for people, I do believe everyone who owns a float center and started a float center, we're different cats. Yeah, we are different than other people.
It's true. It is really
It's
true.
very true. To go forward in floating, to start one from scratch in an area that didn't have one and people didn't know about it. Like, for everyone listening, you're a different person. And don't let anyone ever tell you can't do anything, because if you are still operating 3, 4, 5 years later, you did it. You're doing it. You're
11
doing things
years later,
11 years later. That's nuts. Like, you survived for 11 years. There's so much to be proud of with that. And people who have worked at the same job for 20 years aren't like us, right? Just
not better or worse. Just
different. No, just different. Yeah. And sometimes I wish I was good at math and I was okay with just being boring and I could be a CPA and make a bunch of money and live this, kind of mundane life. Like, I wish I could be happy with that, but I need risks. I'm like a risk taker. I like living on the edge. I have an authority issue. So when people are telling me not to do something, I'm like, F you, I'm going to go do that. Right.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Oh, God. I won't get into it, all the stories right now, but I feel like that is very true of entrepreneurs. Lord have mercy, do I have issues with authority, which is so weird. Conceptually, I don't, but in action, I really do.
Yeah. I'm with you.
Yeah, and if we were okay with authority, at some point, all of us would have not done what we did, because I don't even need to know, but I know there were people who doubted you when you started this, and they were like, "What are you doing? People are going to pay you to float in water?"
I don't think I've talked about this on the podcast. The lame part for me was I didn't have haters. I didn't have people saying this is the dumb idea. I had everybody being like, "Yeah, awesome. I'll be there when you open. Like, that's so cool. I'll be there." And none of them showed, and I didn't hear from them again. They just fell off the map, and that was almost worse. Like, I thought you were going to be there, man, and to be like, how long does it take to visit? Oh, now it's been 2 years. Now it's been 3. Okay, this is.
It's really funny you say that, because one of the number one things we heard from friends and family who came to visit our center when we opened, they would walk through and go, "Whoa, this is like a real place. It's like a real business." And it's real, as if we were doing something that was just like a hole in the wall. So we're going to piece together this thing and see if it works, and not launch a real business. And I remember having conversations with Graham that what do they mean? What did they think we were doing? I mean, we said we're investing everything, and we're going to create this amazing place.
Totally.
And to have people walk in, and I loved that they loved it, but it was also kind of painful to have people be like, "Wow, this is real. You guys are actually doing this?" I'm like, "Oh, come on."
My favorite is my brother had to remind me of this, where it was either USPS or it was a UPS driver dropped something off during construction. It was maybe a float tank was sitting in the lobby or something, and he's like, "Well, what's going on here?" And explained it, and he goes, "And people will pay for that?"
Could pay for that. Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, it didn't even rub me the wrong way. And then my brother told me, it stuck with him, and he told me about it. I was like, yeah, that was a lot of people's thinking. They're not going to say it. He was just not, socially being cool, but most people stifle that. But people are going to pay to do nothing for 90 minutes. Are you insane? You invested how much? Okay.
Turns out they will.
They will.
Yeah. And it turns out that the world needs more of it. Lots more of it. Yeah.
And that's also the other underlying fact for all of us that started a float center, is we truly believe in it. And it's something that we all really care about, and we didn't do it to get rich. Like that wasn't making money was not that was like fourth or fifth on my list of what motivated me. And, you know, to be in the position where now I'm selling, I do also feel like, as I've been talking to people, they're like, well, what's the catch? And it's like, there's no catch. I care about this. I just
potential buyers, you mean?
Potential buyers, yeah. And it's like, well, why do you want to sell, right? It's like, I just want to go do something different. It's that simple. But I feel like there's this little bit of like, well, what's the rub? What's the deal? Like, no rub. It's been a 6-year journey, longer. I actually from the like daydreaming standpoint, right? And like, I'm just tired of doing it. I want to go do something different. I'm not a day-to-day person. This is literally the longest job I've ever had. I haven't had a job that I went to every day for 5 years. I'm now doing that.
And it's not just any job though, Drew. Like this is a big job. This is an all-in kind of job that you can't just turn off at night. And, you know, if you're doing it right, you care. You know, you talked about that. And I think there have been some folks, I think, who got into the industry and thought that it was a way to make money. And those are the folks that typically they close within a year or two. You know, they don't make it past that. And to say, you know, that you've made it this far and you're still running, still successful, people are still wanting to come in and float with you is huge. And the fact that, you know, you're not in this huge rush to get rid of it. Like that you want to find the right people, I assume, to take over, right?
Totally. And coming back to kind of full circle about making the decision. It's I'm not burnt out. I'm in a good position to negotiate because I'm not burnt out. I do want to go do something else, but, you know, I'm not super unhappy. Like I kind of have my space dialed in and kind of on cruise control more than anything else, right? I'm not like hitting the gas.
Yeah, that's a great feeling. I will say that's a really great feeling to be able to just walk in and like not have to worry about things. I popped by the center last night to drop off some new brochures and like I didn't feel like I had to go inspect anything. Like I just pop in to just kind of check in like so that I know and I can say that I've done it, but it feels so good to know that like my team's taking care of stuff. And like that is so different from where I started. And I remember probably in some of my early episodes on the podcast talking about like, I want to be there. Graham and I are like the faces of our business and I don't want other people running this, you know, and how much that transition like came out of nowhere, but it just felt right. And I think part of it, Drew, was really recognizing that like, my interest, I wasn't as fulfilled. I love being there and talking to the people, but it was the day in, day out kind of stuff that I just knew I had more that I needed to be doing and to be offering and to kind of evolve and grow and change with that.
Totally. And that's actually a good point. Like for the first like 3 or 4 years, I wanted to be there talking to people about floating. Right. And I mean, at this point, I've probably had the same conversation 10, 12,000 times, right? Like legitimately, I sometimes I'll catch myself saying something. I'm like, didn't I just say that? It's like, no, I said it an hour ago.
Oh,
right?
Interesting.
Yeah. But it's, but now those 16-hour days feel like 16-hour days because I'm in the same spot saying the same things after 10,000 times. And that's not my personality. Otherwise, I'd have been at the same job I was at.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yep. So I'm curious, Drew, have you thought about, because I mean, it's like you said before, your kind of pendulum swings with hiring employees and creating a team to run it for you. Like, what was it that made you decide that having people run it for you wasn't the right solution, that you really did want to sell and, move on to something else?
So that's a great question because I've had so something I found is that the same people who were telling me not to open a float center have been telling me don't sell your float center. I'm like, that's how I know it's a good decision. You were telling me not to do it. I did it. It was now you're telling me don't do it. And I'm like, no, I'm going to do it.
Don't do it. What's their?
Because it's a good let it. You got to manage it, run it. You got a good thing going. Yeah. Why would you? Then what? Right? Like, well, what are you going to do now? Right? So, like, don't worry about
it's a different
me.
mentality. They live in a different world.
Yeah,
Interesting.
totally. And what do I have now? I have 6 years of knowledge. Well, 6 years of knowledge of and doing something that people said I couldn't do. And I have this confidence that, believe me when I say it is not cockiness. I am very confident in my abilities to succeed at whatever I put my mind to. And I feel as though starting a float center proved that to myself. I don't need anyone's advice to tell me on whether or not I should sell my float center. I don't need, so like people I was talking to and my like the people I looked up to when I first started my float center, I feel like I'm the student that has passed the teacher, because now I started a business. I went through a partnership that dissolved. I'm looking to sell the business. None of these people have done any of that. They're good at business, but they haven't been through the things I've been through, and they didn't take.
I feel attacked, Drew. I feel attacked.
No, no float people included in that. They're non-float people, right? And the biggest reason I want to sell is because I want a chunk of cash to go do my next thing with, which I'll announce someday. But I need my bag to go do my next project. That's my capital. That's my reward for the last 5 years of hard work that I did, that I think I'll be able to take what I've done, pass it to someone else in a win-win situation and relationship where someone who doesn't own their own business right now, and we'll get to this, but that's who I think would end up buying my float center, is someone who's not, maybe someone who's floated and is like, okay, I'm ready for a change. But they're going to be able to learn business. They're going to be able to learn all the things I've learned over the last 5 years. And I now have that knowledge and will take the money. And just real quick, I mortgaged my house to start the business. I took a major risk, and I did a lot of it with my own two hands. I didn't hire a general contractor. I saved in every way I could, and I was willing to do what I could do. But now I feel as though I've earned, my little chunk of change, and I'll take that. And that's what I need to start my next business, which I think I can 1000% make successful. And I'm confident with my abilities to do that if I can just get that startup capital. So, and I've also had, it's so funny. People are so old school. They're like, why don't you just leverage your business and get a loan from the bank? I'm like, that's not how it works. Like I don't know why you think that you can just go to a bank and be like, hey, I have a business. Can I get $500,000? Like, no, you can't. That's not how it works, So, so that's kind of how I got to that, yeah, I don't want to learn how to manage people. I'm the type, I've learned this about myself. I need to know what I need to do. I need someone who knows what they need to do. We'll high five, go do what we got to do, come back and high five again because it's done. I can't be looking after you and looking over your shoulder and checking to make sure I'm not good at that. That's not my skill set. I struggle with that. So, trying to hire, Gloria's obviously, she does good at that. She identifies, she trains, she lifts people up. She's great at that. That's not a skill set I have. And that's being honest with myself that I don't have that. Yeah. So I'm limited with what I can do with my float center, right? So that's where I think it could be a win-win for someone else who has a skill set that I don't have and come in and improve and do better than what I'm doing, right? And then I can go and do my own thing on my next thing. And it can be a win-win for everybody. But yeah, to get back to the answer, Kim, that's really it. I want a chunk of change to go do my next project. That's it.
Cool.
Yeah. And it's change that you've earned, you've invested, you've given so much to that place for so many years, and to be able to create it and to create it in a way that was really smart, that is obviously successful, like we looked at a potential second location, and at some point that might still happen, but construction costs are crazy right now. So, if you were here, I would be looking at you like really hard, considering buying instead of, building another center like that. It's a smart, it's a good time to be in that position, because new construction right now is just wild. Totally. Not that it was ever cheap to begin with. Right. but pretty wild to see, how things have evolved just in the past few years.
Totally. And this is probably a good time too to maybe bring up, we were talking, it's about 6 years, maybe 7-year journey that I've been on since the inception of the idea. But we were talking before we started the podcast, and maybe you can speak on this a little more, Kim, about the, I don't know if it's really called the 7-year itch, but
everybody knows it's a 7-year itch.
Everyone knows what that is.
Yeah. And if you don't, and you've been married for 5 or 6 years, get ready. But it applies to all sorts of relationships. If you look at, jobs, if, from the past, if you look at just about any relationship, honestly, and even kind of blowing it up, looking at the float industry as a whole, things tend to operate in 7-year cycles. And a lot of times at the end of that, as you're coming to that 7th year, there's a lot of uneasiness. There's a lot of questioning that's going on of, is this right for me? Is this not right for me? Specifically, if you look at it from a marriage perspective, that's when most people cheat. A lot of divorces happen within that 7-year, range. There's a lot of information behind it. I don't know enough to go super in depth on it, but I do see it play out a lot. I know so many people who stay at their jobs for 6 to 7 years and then they're done. Looking at our industry, we hit this huge growth spurt 6 to 7 years ago, and we're starting to see some folks now who are kind of whew, this has been wild. It's been great, but it's time for me to move on. It's time for me to try something new and different. And there are also still so many people coming into it at the same time. And so it's not like there's this broken industry thing happening, but I think we had so many people who were coming in at the same time. And then many of those same folks were kind of in that class together and starting to not weed themselves out, but kind of, recognize that there might be something more. It might be time for a change. You've, like you said, you've done it, you built it, you made it happen, and now what? But there's
7 years.
7 years.
If you've hit the 3-year mark, I think that is incredible. 7 years is.
How do you get to 11? How do you get to 11, Dylan?
I just get nothing. I got nothing.
You start a podcast. That's how.
Going back a little bit, I to what you guys were talking about, or I guess Drew specifically about I've had this conversation so many times. I do still enjoy the conversations mostly. Like Kim, if I fold another towel, I feel like a needle is being put under my fingernail. A little bamboo shoot is being put under my fingernail. It hurts. And then there are people, I would say about 70% of the time, it's such a cool conversation afterwards to talk with them. And then 30% of the time, I'm like, you're not an energy vampire. You're a cool person. But because I've done this so many times, I feel my energy being released, there's a cost to it that's higher because I'm not as fresh, and I love practicing presence when talking with people. And I love practicing presence particularly in my lobby, right? Connecting with somebody, bringing them into this, seeing their excitement levels, trying to figure out where they're coming from. I enjoy that game to keep me active, my brain and my soul connected, that's important for me. And then there are times where it's oh my God, this is so difficult for me, and I'm going to get through it. I'm going to maintain, but this costs me for sure. I don't know how to get from 7 to 11. One of the
just hold your breath and hope.
Yeah, that's mostly it. No, 2 of those years were through a pandemic too. Right. What a weird ass time. So, yeah, I don't know. Shoot, I forgot what I was gonna say. Drew, there's something else that you're talking about that I wanted to hit on. Oh, you know what? It just keeps bubbling up for me on tonight's episode. I haven't said anything about it. Is that and we've talked about it before, but that you listened to the podcast, you reached out, we consulted together. You were an absolute sponge for this stuff. You were very not aggressive in a negative, this guy's aggressive, but you were aggressive with information. You were hungry for the information. Yeah. You would ask directly. And I also got that you were a sweat equity guy as well. and then yeah, I won't make any comments on your business partner, but what I saw in you was just tons of drive and grit, and that was very cool. Like I had a lot of respect for what you were doing. And then for you to join the podcast after opening was really exciting. And it was kind of funny looking back. It's like, yeah, we need the new owner, you know, like the fresh green type of person on the podcast too. But you obviously brought so much more to the game. And then to see you cashing in your chips, but like, yeah, I did this. I worked my ass off. I contacted the right people to get the right information to do this correctly. I put in the effort to build it properly. I connect with people to build the audience, the clientele, and now I'm cashing in my chips to keep myself fulfilled, provide for the family, like all the things that fulfill you. I love that. It's just crazy. My mind is kind of melting as we're talking tonight, listening to you guys.
Little full circle.
Yeah.
And full circle. And everything you just said is all stuff that I've learned and can do the exact same thing with in the next thing I want to do.
Yeah.
And I'm already doing that.
I know you need people saying you can't, but you're not going to get that from us because we've seen that from you. We know what you can do. So like yeah, of course. Yes, you will.
Yeah, I've kind of figured out a formula of how to do it. And I'm willing to work hard, and I've proven it to myself. And I will do that for my next thing. I just hope for my next thing that I'll be able to not have to like be there day to day. And I do believe I'll figure that out to be able to do that, you know? But yeah, what a journey it's been. And I feel like I'm very lucky from how it began and to be at this point now and being able to even decide now. Like I said, I'm not burnt out. I still do enjoy talking to the people. At this point, I have like friendly customers where there's this gray area where they're a customer but friends now too. Yeah. And I think that's part of making a decision too early versus too late. Like maybe I'm doing it too early and I could be fine for another couple of years. But my interests are changing, and I don't want to be in a bad spot where I'm taking the lowballest offer because, as we'll get into in other episodes, other people who don't understand floating and what you went through to build it won't value it the same way that you do. And that will be an interesting episode when we talk about value. And
how often do we talk about how like the build out is going to be way longer than you think? And they're like, yeah, okay. And they know it's not going to be that long. It's going to be
single time.
Every time. So there's no way somebody buying a float center understands how much goes into opening a float center. They cannot. They literally cannot understand it.
Nope.
Yeah.
Nope. And so there's value in that.
To convince them, well, yeah, tell me about the value.
Well, so there is value in that. And even if they don't, so that's where it's kind of a mind F because you're trying to sell to people who don't understand. And now you're talking about value. And I won't get too much into value, but there's a disconnect there. We know what it takes to start a float center from scratch. We know what went into the float rooms. We know how long that took, the journey. You don't want to buy my float center? Good luck. Go put one next to me. By the time you're done in 2 years, I'll sell my float center to someone who sees the value. But I know what it takes, and add to everything going on in the world, it's going to take you longer and cost you more money than it took me.
Yeah, that's
right.
True. Yep.
You know, it's really funny. Like that just reminds me of my initial timeline that we announced Tsukino in the summer of 2017. We announced that we were opening it. We're getting ready to gear up and start construction. It took us
that winter, I assume.
Yeah, we were hoping by the end of the year. And,
is that right? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And then we knew that more realistically, because we did listen a little bit to all of those, like, it's not going to happen by then. We thought early 2018, like, definitely. It took us over 5 months just to get funding approved. 5 months just to get funding approved. We opened in November 2018.
Wow.
Announced it to our friends and family in June of 2017, announced publicly in July of 2017, and didn't open until November 2018. So that alone, oh my gosh, that was just such a hard, long, painful time of like scrapping for everything, anything we could get, looking for locations, getting all the work that went into it. And I just look at that now and I'm like, whew, that was like the longest time ever. And then construction was quick for us. I mean, it only took 4 months. It was only 4 months.
Only 4 months, not bad.
Only 4 months.
Nice.
Right. Out of that
bad.
super long timeline. Just wild to look at it and to be able to, present somebody else with the opportunity. And that's really what this is. It's the opportunity for somebody else to be able to step in and miss all of that agony. They'll never have the same sense of appreciation for it, having not gone through it. But the agony that goes into that, like, I don't even know. Knowing now, I don't know if I could put a price tag on that. Like how much.
Oh my God. Yes.
All of
the
that
toll on
was.
Sandra and I's relationship at the time. Brutal. Absolutely. And the fact that we're still together. Like, oh my God. Yeah. No dollar sign above that, priceless to avoid that. But that what you're talking about makes me think, like, Drew, you're talking about a series of episodes going in depth about selling, but this almost seems like if you're buying, these are the episodes to find the insights onto the equity that goes into building these places out, the value that you're buying into.
Totally. And that's kind of a preview. That's kind of my job now, is to try to show people the reason I'm asking, the asking price I'm asking includes the journey you don't have to go through. And not only that, you don't have to go through it now in our current economic conditions.
Right.
Because it was bad back then. It's even worse now, right? So if you so many factors, right? But trying to show that to people, because also people get really focused on the profit and loss. And that's a piece of it, right? You obviously have to have a profitable business, but there's value in skipping that build out and having customers and having this already established email list of thousands of people, a brand, being number one on your search engines or wherever, like social media. There's value in all types of things. And, we'll talk about that more, but when people have no business sense and they're trying to tell you what your business is worth, I actually told my wife, I said to her, when this all started, I said, do not let me devalue my business to someone who doesn't understand my business. It's the worst thing you could do. Yes, right.
Yes, they're going to get it.
They'll get it eventually.
Your job. Yes.
Yeah, and
you'll find it.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, but it's easy for someone who doesn't understand what we do to place a lower value on it.
How many people walk into a float center and say, "Man, that was awesome! I'm going to get a float pod and I'm going to put it in a room with a shower." Done.
Right.
No.
So you're paying for a car, first of all. Okay. Good. Step one. Yeah. And then they're like, oh, that's why I pay for what I do for a float.
Yeah.
Like, actually, that's only one piece of why you pay what you do for a float.
Yeah.
And the truth is, in 5 years, there really hasn't been a float center open up near me, like within an hour, 50 minutes. Wild. Right. And so you'd think if it was that easy, more would have popped up. Hasn't happened. Right.
We've had a lot of folks who come in and said, "Hey, I'm thinking about opening a center in town." I'm like, "All right, cool. Let's show you what goes into it."
Yeah. And they're like, "Wait, you don't just sit behind a desk and talk to everyone?" Like, no, that's not it. I wish.
But there's so much
Art of the Float
good that comes out of that, though.
Yeah.
Co-owner of Art of the Float, Brian. He doesn't like me saying BVP anymore, but BVP. Can't think of him otherwise. His parents. I'm putting this out on blast. His parents came and visited the float shop. Within like a year or two of us opening, and it was very important to me to just provide a calm space for somebody when they walked in. So I'm sweating ass, running around, doing all my stuff on transitions, but then when I'm out front, all I'm projecting is calm and peace. And so they came and visited. I hung out with them, poured them tea. We hung out, we talked and everything, and it was just like this really sweet. hangout and conversation. And you know, eventually they leave. And then I get word from Brian a couple days later, like they were like, wow, so Dylan just sits around on a couch all day and that's his job, like that's his business, is just sitting around, like shouldn't he, like, interesting, like in a negative way, you know? It's like, great, that is exactly what should be projected out to people coming in, is all I do is sit and drink tea with people. But behind the scenes there's a whole lot more going on that we can't, no, you literally can't understand it unless you're doing it. You just can't understand what goes on.
And why anybody would want to do that. Like, why would we go through all of this craziness to do all of this hard work? It's because that seeing somebody after a float and, you know, recognizing, we have a member who came in tonight and I was chatting with one of my team members about her. And it's, you know, just to know this person, I was like, you didn't get to meet her back in the beginning, but to know the person who comes in now, and we were talking about how great and wonderful and sweet and nice she was. I'm like, yeah, she wasn't always. But she has had this transformation over the past 3 to 4 years that she's been coming to see us. And she is a totally different human now. And that's why it is worth it to go through all of that hard stuff, is to be able to get to the point where you can look at somebody and go, wow, this floating thing has really changed that person's life. And like, it still gives me goosebumps to think about, like,
just gave me goosebumps listening to you. And that's the warm and fuzzies. That's the motivator, right?
It's still worth it. And you can still feel that way and recognize, Drew, that it's time for you to do something else too, so that you can continue to love and honor and respect the float and say good things about it before you get to the point that it's not right for you anymore. So
totally.
I want to add, I know this is the selling your float center part, but like in the other direction, like we've had clients that were hospice care patients, like they were on their way out of this world. And going to Rise, I tried to read this letter somebody had written before she passed, and I couldn't finish it. I had to have somebody else read it, so I don't even know if people understood what I said. But this was one of the only times they didn't experience pain, right? It was like 90 minutes in the float tank, and they can just have their own thoughts, not be in pain and not be crushed. And it is really cool to be able to experience. Sorry, try to maintain. I don't need that connection with every single client. It is okay to have employees having those experiences, and it's okay to be managing and knowing that people are having those experiences going through my center. That does still fulfill me and add something for me. But it is good to have those reminders. Those reminders are important. So sorry, I know I'm going the other direction with that, but for those people who are hanging on to their float centers, you do get that value, or you're, want to have a manager, all that stuff, like those values in you are still important, and it is still okay if you have that buffer in between you. If it's not fulfilling you the same way, I don't know what my point is. Okay.
Floating is good, and selling your float center when it's not right for you anymore is also good, as long as you're still loving the float.
You got to figure out what's right for you. I think that's
what's right for you.
Thanks. I needed that quick buffer, Kim.
Yes.
That's a big thing, right?
It is.
Trying to figure out what makes you happy, and as much as we're providing for others, like, don't forget about you. Also have to live your life and do what fulfills you and what makes you happy, and
practice what we preach.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to take care of others but not taking care of yourself, then it's diminishing returns on taking care of others. Like,
you got it.
You have to be selfish to that degree.
Yeah, and when I step back and look at a macro level of what's going on at my flow center, I feel like some new energy would be awesome for the flow center. And they'd probably do some cool things that I'm just not interested in doing. And I know that. And I'll hear from other people doing cool stuff at their float centers, and I'm like, oh, I should do that. And I'm like, then that's kind of it, right? Like, I'll think, oh, that's awesome, I should do that. And then I just go on with my day. And I don't do it, right? But someone with new energy might should come in and do that stuff and do full moon floats and do more like, I don't do any retail anymore. I just like this stuff I just don't do, and it's like, come on in, add your flavor, and bring your vibe to the community. And and even that, like, we'll get into this more, but I've had people question, like, what happens when I leave? And I'm like, it's an opportunity for you to bring in your people. I attract my people who might not jive the same way that your people would jive with you. And instead, to me, it's not a detriment. It's an opportunity to build your own community and your people. And, you know, I'm me. And so I attract certain type of people, and I'm going to rub some people the wrong way. And I get that, and it's all good. And maybe they go to another float center and float at that place. But I have space for people that, you know, vibe with me, and that's awesome. And if you come in and buy my place, you can vibe with people. You just got to be here and talk to them, and you'll attract your people. Or you won't if you're a jerk. Like, that's on you. But, you know, that's, yeah. So we'll talk more about those other topics, including how do you find someone to actually buy a float center, because I actually ran an ad and I had good response to it, and I'll tell people about that. And I'll even share the website on that episode because it's still active, and I have a really cool video explaining that my float center is for sale. So we'll kind of get into all of that, but yeah, the decision has been made. I'm 100% going to sell my float center. There's multiple people who are actively looking at my finances right now as we record this episode, and we'll see where that goes. But I look forward to kind of sharing. And I hope I also, just for people who are listening, I hope I can be a resource if you are, I'm not in a bad spot. So I can't speak to being like, I just need to sell, and anyone who looks my way, we're going to dance. But I can speak to being in a good spot, and I think I'm in a position of power in the negotiation as far as I don't need to sell. I want to, but I don't need to, you know?
So, Drew, if somebody is listening and they're interested in, you know, looking at your center and possibly buying it, how do they reach out to you?
They can check out nhfloat.com or reach out to Drew at nhfloat.com, or find me on social media. You could also reach out to me on Facebook, Drew Jitsu, Instagram, Drew Jitsu, and yeah, I'm around. If anyone wants to talk about it, or even just say, hey, what's it look like? How do you even begin to to come up with the process? Because I've learned a lot about my business that I didn't know prior to having to get ready to sell, and it's been eye-opening, and it's probably stuff I should have known before, but when I'm in it, I'm not thinking about. And there are things you can do I want to maximize the value of my business. I don't want to be in a bad spot where I'm like, just give me something and let me get out of here. I want to try to get the most amount of money possible out of my business. And I think I'm in a good spot to be able to do that.
Man, talk about full circle. Talking about selling it on the podcast, putting it out there. That's crazy, man. Drew, I hope we were able to talk about how you value your business. I know behind the scenes we've talked about that, and you have some crazy great insights on that. I want to talk about brokers, how to find people who are going to buy your center. Yeah, let's do this. Yeah. Makes me sad. I got to say, there's a feeling of loss I feel with it. I'm so happy and excited for you. But yeah.
It's not lost yet. It's coming, but it hasn't happened yet.
I'm the one who's always stressed out about like global warming. Like I'm seeing what's ahead, and it stresses me out. You know, I should be more in the moment, admittedly, but yeah. Anywho, geez. You know, when we have a guest on, we always ask, you know, is there anything in conclusion you'd like to leave our audience with? What would you leave our audience with tonight, Drew, as our guest?
As our guest, and as the topic is about the decision, I would say now think about what is the future like for you and your business. Do you have an exit strategy? The sooner you think about it, the better prepared you will be, and the more value you will get out of your business. And the less you think about it, the worse it's going to be when you get to a point where you're like, oh, snap, I need to sell my business and don't really have a choice. You know, that you become, you just kind of become stuck between a rock and a hard place. And so if I could leave people with anything, I hope this sparks you to start thinking about what do you do next, if there is a next, and even if there's not, because I've had conversations with someone who's older and they're thinking like, I'm not going to do this forever. So what, maybe 5-10 more years, and then what? and how do I get out when it's 5 or 10 more years?
Interesting.
Right. So,
and truly, as a good business owner, I have a feeling the things that you're going to be sharing with us are things that we should know about our businesses anyway, so that we can help control and shift and improve upon them if we don't already. So I think it's going to be a pretty valuable exercise for everybody.
Totally.
I can't wait to learn from you on that.
I really hope it sparks a lot of people to think about it and at least, get your books in order, right? Like if that stuff's not, it's going to be such a hard sell if you're not keeping track of your stuff. I am keeping track of my stuff, and it's still confusing to some people. It's like, so think about it. Think seriously about your skills, what you want to do, what makes you happy, what drives you. Be honest with yourself. I think those are all good things to leave people with, that you should have a serious, not in the float center thought about it. Like, step back, think about it when you're not in it, and be honest with yourself. And if you have to write down pros and cons, go ahead and do that. But I think if you're just not thinking about it at all and you're just in it, then when you don't want to be in it anymore, it's going to be a lot more difficult for you when you decide that you don't want to be in it anymore. So I am fortunate to be from New England, where the best coach in football history, Bill Belichick, famously says he'd rather let go of a player a year or two early than hold on to them a year or two too late. And that's what happened with Tom Brady. He let him go early, but that's always been his motto. And I kind of agree with that in the business sense. Like, I'd rather be done a year or two early versus a year or two late, because it's not going to benefit me to wait that long. It's just, it'll benefit someone else who's going to buy it at a great deal. Right. So think about it. Everyone who's listening, get those conversations going. If you have partners, how do you exit? What's your thoughts? And be honest with what makes you happy and what drives you.
Whew, wow. Have we had a guest with a better last note for the episode?
Oh.
Damn, Drew. Yeah.
That's just the beginning. There's a lot that goes into selling your flow center, and I have so much to share. Yeah. I'm way further along than just having decided, just so people know. So we'll kind of retroactively share some of that stuff.
And it was Carlos that we had on previously, who had sold his float center. And when you say it's only the beginning, also, like, once you sell, it's a new beginning. Like, once he let go, it was like, oh my gosh, there is this whole other world, and there seemed to be no regrets whatsoever, and just a lot of zest for life. And I think sometimes we hang on to things longer than we need to. Speaking of, you were talking about relationships, like romantic, personal relationships. I mean, who hasn't hung on to a relationship too tightly, too long, and when it should have been over? So interesting that we might just do that again in some other facet of our life. Thank you, Drew. Goodness gracious. I'm excited to start this series. This is going to be some great info. And like you said, even if we're not about to sell, just having all that stuff dialed in and ready to go is where we should be anyway. Thank you, Drew and Kim. Thanks to everybody for listening to this really cool episode, just a tight 30-minute episode. And thanks to everybody supporting us on Patreon. Thanks for supporting Mindful Solutions, Kim's project. If you want help with your social media, my goodness, just talk to her. Mindful, that's 2Ls.solutions. And she can just get your social media running. It's great. And actually, I've become more and more active in Mindfully Social, which is their programs. What is it? Buffer platform to post out all your social media stuff. Just more active in there, tweaking things, just going in there and posting my own stuff in there to fill it out as well. And finally just becoming more active with that and kind of loving it. Get in contact with Kim. It's a project. Your own social media takes a lot of work, and just to have somebody else running it for you, getting it out there, always knowing you have a content drip is so nice for me. Thanks so much to Helmbot for supporting us. Thanks to the FTA for supporting us. Super cool. We appreciate you guys so much. We appreciate what you do for the industry. It has so much meaning and impact for us. And whom else? Thanks, producer Olga. Thank you so much for producing this show. And I think that's it. Until next time, take a day off. Look into, like Drew said, the pros and the cons. Should you be running a float center or should you sell? I don't know. We'll see. Find out next week. See you next week.